Welcome back, everybody. This is MGM MarketAbilities podcast. We have a very special guest on today.
Two of them.
Yeah. Well, guests, plural. Yes.
The tuba company.
Yeah. I've only known them literally my entire life, I think.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I mean, ever since I was like, one? Or maybe, what were you guys around when I was born?
So it's mom and dad,
right
everybody.
after.
It's mom and dad, yes.
Yeah, two.
Okay.
I mean, we got you about 1.5 to 2.
Gotcha.
Tyrant, just absolute tyrant.
Yeah. So they've been around my entire
Troublemaker.
life. Troy...
Pastor
Troy and I have worked together on so many projects throughout my life, especially in the last 6 to 7 years.
Yeah, around the globe.
Yeah, we've worked together on about a billion things. Troy is an evangelist, a preacher, an author of a book, which I always forget about.
Making a church from scratch.
Yeah,
our Bristol house.
Yeah, and how many degrees do you have? I don't even have it written down.
I've got several. I got
102.
I've got my bachelor's, my master's, my doctorate in church development and marketing, which is what we're talking about, and got a second degree in missiology.
It's ridiculous.
I know.
Yeah.
Missiology is missions of the church.
But still his better half.
But
Yes, and then of course we have Beth, because we don't know where Troy would be without you.
No,
if we're being honest.
No, you wouldn't be able to find him.
You wouldn't be able to find me.
You need me
And
to
she
find
edited
him.
all the papers, so all my degrees she did
Oh,
and finished.
you
She made me look at.
You two have
She's
a lot
what
of
made
degrees.
me magna cum laude.
I love that.
Thank you, Lordy.
Love that. You know, we're paying these fine people back. We were on a fabulous podcast last week on the dock with Pastor Troy, and for me, one of my best experiences on a podcast ever. It was so good.
sweet.
We really thank you guys.
Do you guys know when that's going to be out, roughly?
We haven't set you guys yet, but
Okay.
probably late February, early March.
Yeah.
On the doc.org. You can go there and kind of watch for it. And
Yeah. So they film way more episodes than we do.
Yes.
And so this will be out before that one.
Okay.
this will be out before that, so you'll be in front of us.
This will be out in February.
Oh, wow.
So just be on the lookout. I will put links in the description below.
Well, I'll change
or
our
on
schedule.
the
You
doc.
tell me when yours is. We'll
how
tell,
we work together.
We'll tell executive producer Donna to move things around, because we're a bit fluid too. You know, we can move things around.
Yeah.
We shoot our season in about 3 months, and then we
Right.
spread it out over the year.
Sure.
So
Well, sometimes during that podcast and even off the air, we talked about all of the things that you guys have going on. And, you know, you talked about some of those things, but you have the church, you have so many not-for-profit things, and then and you've got other things in development. We really wanted to have you out just for those people who do not know, we've got to put them in the know and make them understand all that you guys are trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do. So we don't want to waste any time.
No, I
just
appreciate
jump
that.
right in. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the very heart of it. Beth and I were called years ago to the work of being a pastor, but to be more than that, a church planner. And a church planner is just a fancy word for somebody who starts a new, I don't want to say business, but a new organization for Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
And with that, my undergraduate degree is in economics and finance, starting new economic entities, finance entities. I was in the insurance world. Had my own insurance agency, took over from my grandfather, and one day I was literally in the old Gospel Land bookstore in True Value Shopping Center Mall, and I heard God say, I could use an entrepreneur like you in my church. I was out looking at old Methodist churches that were closing, and I was the insurance agent for all the conference properties.
Right.
And I'd done 3 that day. Old churches that were closing had old history, legacy. They had cemeteries out back, and I thought, this is so sad. Do they even open any? And I was Methodist at the time, and I called my superintendent and said, do we ever start churches? He says, we have not started one in 30 years. Beth and I started the next 2 churches. It took us 3 years of seminary and other work and stuff, but the time we got trained, we ended up starting the first and the second church in over a 30-year period, and that's where we met Lucas.
Incredible.
Lucas was a 2-year-old in the first church we started at Highland Hope in
Wow.
Highland, Illinois.
Yeah.
I started with his parents
Yeah.
as the first core group and one other family. And that journey started our church planting world and starting churches. I pastored before that briefly as an associate and doing smaller churches while I was trained.
Very different, because the term plant, and I don't know that people really hang on that word very often, but many times you're called to plant in a very a desperate area, in a place needing a church, in a place needing revival. And that could be I know of an old VFW club that became a church. It was
Wow.
whatever the need in that community, and many times
Where did we start?
We
Highland
started in old
Yeah.
junior high school.
old junior high.
Yeah, we started in all kind. We started in our basement. We started in our junior high school.
Yeah.
Other churches. We bought an old dead church in another place in Waterloo.
Right.
Gosh, we have churches I've now planted not just in America, but we planted our own churches here. I wrote a book called Making a Church from Scratch. Went back and got my master's in divinity and became a full blown pastor.
After the fact.
Yeah.
Then I got my doctorate in church development evangelism from SMU. Got my master's from memory. A doctorate in church development evagelism is a doctorate in church marketing. It's just you're developing church.
Yeah.
So I planted churches, wrote a book about it, and then next thing I know, I thought, gosh, I wonder if this works outside the U.S.
Yeah.
I did some coaching all through the St. Louis area. I spoke for other organizations. I spoke across entities and small denominations. And help. I didn't pastor. I didn't plan all of them, but I became a coach for many others. We developed. I helped do brand marketing, logo marketing, launch marketing for them, and all that. We had that. We did that for a while, and then one day I just felt a chance to go to Honduras, where I'd been going with my mentor, and I said, you think we could try planting a church here? I always wanted to know if what we do here would work elsewhere.
Right.
Are your
Church
principles?
without
Are your principles? Are they transferable?
Yes.
And we went to Honduras.
And it's interesting because church. What does church mean to you, Beth? When you hear the word church, you're schooled, right? But it doesn't have to be in a. It's where two or more meet in my name, isn't it? You'll learn.
A family of people who who come together and worship God and learn about Him.
Absolutely. And too many times people hear the word church and they're like, oh, not for me. But I bet it would be if you had your friends and some like-minded people around you, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, people have they've had bad things happen to them in a church by people, not the actual church itself.
That's right.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's the best thing about when it comes to like having a community is church.
Oh, yeah.
Like
that's what it should be.
Yeah.
And the church is the same everywhere, but each community of that church will reflect that location.
Absolutely.
And one of the gifts when God put that call on me to plant churches was I have this God gave me a gift to kind of I want to say my sample is you can feel the soil and go, your dad was an agricultural product for his whole life, and he knew how to test the soil and knew what it needed in it and this. Yeah. And the best example is God's given me the ability to go in an area and see what the critical need is demographically. Where's there a need not being met? In Highland, it was for 20 to 30-year-olds having their first or second kid, living to mortgaged and car to the hill. And so we targeted our church specifically at young couples with their first kids. We didn't have enough money to go after, older families, senior families.
Sure.
We just had enough money for one group. And then over time, we opened our bandwidths as time developed. And I've been able to go into Honduras or Pattaya, Thailand, where it's mostly Buddhist, and feel the soil and begin to connect with that culture a little bit and find a dynamic that'll work there. Yeah. This plant won't work here, but this plant might work here. And God gave me really the vision to do that, to start it.
Whether your lives are at risk or not, because you've shared some of those stories. Yeah. It's like,
Troy is
Jesus,
fearless.
be with me now.
Yeah, Troy is fearless because of his faith.
Troy is not fearless.
I'm scared of my wife. I'm scared of my wife. I don't like doctors. MRI machines, CT machines scare me.
Grasshopper in his
Grasshopper,
car.
I scream like a girl. Everything with more than 6 legs, terrifying, and a millipede. I mean, I sweat my pants.
Yeah.
I have things I'm scared of.
Right.
But the work of the gospel, that I'm not scared of. The promise is, if we're faithful, He'll be there for us.
That's wonderful.
God's never let me down. We have done a crusade. Lucas has been a part of that. People from our church in those days. We were over in Thailand doing a crusade in this community called Taperset. And we were just showing the Jesus film one night, getting ready to build a core that would become a church there. And it's a church there today. While we're doing the second night of this, we're literally, 50 feet from me on a manhole, a guy comes out in a full-blown mask with a machete. Oh. And he is a Islamic kind of jihad person. Ooh. And then we're in a Buddhist country, but we're going to hurt the drug trade of this place where we're at. It's a little slum area.
Yeah, he just came out and stood and watched.
He was watching to see. He was trying to decide were we going to hurt his business or help his business, because most of the people coming were in the drug trade. Their wives were in, or the girls were in prostitution, and the children were the result of the Pattaya prostitution and trafficking. And he stood there with a big sword, and we had our people doing the work. I had a bunch of young people there, and we were really reaching the people for Christ. And And I just decided, he's not taking this. We have 150 people down here. It's going to be a church. So I went halfway between, and I just stood there. And to be honest with you, I had a pocket knife in my pocket, and I thought, he's got a machete. This is not going to cut it. So I just started praying, but I started deciding, I said, these people are going to be won to Christ. We're going to see a church planted. And if he comes this way, I'm going to give him the best I got.
Yeah.
He never moved. He sit there and listened for a while. And when it got time to do the invitation, he just all of a sudden just took off.
Turned around and left.
And I don't know if something bigger behind me, greater is he that is in me than he is in the world.
Absolutely.
And he bolted. But
doing the most important work there is to do in the world. I am curious. You said we played the Jesus movie. Which one, or do you play an assortment of all of them, or which one is it?
The Jesus film put out by the Jesus Films. There's one movie. Now they've got a couple new side versions, but it's just it's a real clean gospel, and they have it in almost every known language and even dialect.
Right.
Awesome.
So all through Liberia and Honduras, we've done the same thing.
Great.
We'll go in someplace, pass out information, say, hey, in this place, this soccer place, this area, we're going to show the Jesus film night one, and just let people see Jesus in their language. Night two, we come back and we do worship before.
Because there's so many people there that have never even heard their
That's right. They never heard the name.
And we're going places where they don't even get to see a movie. When you go to Liberia, nobody's had a movie screen put up that's 50 feet. And you know, get some popcorn out. They're watching Jesus, and when the movie's over, there's an invitation to Christ. People respond.
Yeah. It's, during the movie too, they would like laugh at some part, and we couldn't understand it. I mean, we knew what was going on.
They're speaking in Pele, and we know the movie, so it's like, whoa.
They would laugh, they would cheer, they would clap.
When Jesus turns the fish into mini fish and loaves, the whole crowd started cheering.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
In Africa, they go nuts.
I mean, they were
and when the
into
Pharisees were doing their second evil thing,
they're like, can you teach us how to do that?
Yeah.
people started hissing back at the Pharisees.
Yes.
Wow.
And by the end of that, we have people stepping forward. The night two, we come back out and we talk a little bit more about what Jesus offers in the church. And we usually preach and do worship. And then we invite people. If you gave your life to Christ, or you'd like to tonight, come forward. And we have found everywhere we've gone, whether it be in Thailand, whether it be in Padia, Thailand, or in Liberia, or here, when people came forward, we would say, would you be the beginning of that church? And then we put them through a little class. We have their baptisms, and we start with that as the church.
So good.
Yeah.
So
Ground zero.
good. And you know, these people are hungry, because I know in some of these areas of the world where it's not as easy to get a Bible. You know, some of us have 10 Bibles in the house and never pick them up. But these people are tearing these in all these pieces and sharing them, and then rotating just to be able to read it and to be able to absorb
can't even
the word.
Find a Bible in Thailand because they're Buddhists. It's 99.5. So we took them in. We'd have to get them to them, and you're exactly right. They treasure it. The good thing about the modern day is once you can get them to the right app, then you can help them that way too.
Oh, sure.
So that's one thing good like podcasts now. You can take that anywhere. You can download it. And now the Bible's gotten to be very modern.
Don't you have a lot of people watching your podcasts from other countries?
That's
right
the reason we're doing our podcast.
So cool.
It's not just for our local audience, and the reason we broadcast at our church, whether you go to onthedock.org, or if you go to our community faith church, coftv.com, you'll see we put our stuff out because we've got friends and partners, not just here, but across the country and around the world. We have medical people that travel with our Hands Hope Foundation team, educators. They want to stay connected. The On the Dock is kind of a chance for people to learn in a different model and method. And we have, on this Sunday, we had people from Africa, Germany, China, and Liberia, all watching our surf this Sunday.
So not only doing the work of Jesus Christ, but a big part of that is we're instructed to serve. And man, are you guys serving in so many different ways, and through the not-for-profits. And you have another one on the horizon you've talked about. So let's jump into that. And it was so interesting. Just this week, it was shared with me that sometimes in the Christian faith, you know, such a large part of that is serving. But it's those people who serve and crash because they're giving so much of themselves, but they don't ever really think to stop and replenish. I'd like to know the work you're doing, and then also how you two refuel as you go.
That's two tough questions for us. My wife's going to have a different answer than I am. So, first of all, I mean, your whole thing here at MGM is learn, develop, and launch. That is what you do. I'm a church planner, so I'm a church marketer. Church planner, just developing the kingdom of God. That's what Paul did, and Peter did, and look what we have today. If you're successful in that, the brand will go beyond itself, and it'll get a life of itself.
Yes.
And so I've been fortunate because I started off as a pastor, But then I got called to be a church planner. Now I don't inherit something that's done. I have to go start that. I have to learn, develop, and launch. And I did it in a time when the church hadn't started a church in 30 years. So there was nobody that could tell me how to do it. I just had to use what I knew in the principles of God and the principles of good markening. Honestly, I have
everything
to tell
you need.
The toughest work we did, I wish we had you at that time. For me, it would have been so good. Ask me later how I did my marketing in the days before we had people like Growing Media. In a minute, ask me that because you're going to be stunned at how I did it. And it was cheap and but you had to come up with an identity. You needed a mission and a vision and core values or a credo statement. And then you need to get. I hate to say this. You don't have a church. You don't have a building. You have a logo. And the logo is silly. It's a logo. But what it communicates, you get a few seconds for people to decide that's a different church or that's something I want to try. And they're going to flip the page quick. And that was before Facebook and swipe, but it wouldn't take long. So we spent a lot of time on names, different churches. We named different things for different purposes and how we communicated that, the colors we communicated, who we would put that in front of. You've got to learn your audience as a pastor. Quickly. You got to develop very quickly because you may find out that audience's needs are already being met and you need to move over here. We didn't take the top bandwidth in Highland. We took a third one because there were 2 or 3 groups and there were other churches meeting those needs well. And then nobody was meeting the one. And I decided I'd take his third group. There's less of them there, but nobody meeting them. The others had multiple competition. So we picked a target nobody was meeting so it would speak to people that had deficit. And the deficit was people with children that wanted a strong children's church, that wanted some sort of after school care, that needed something to help their lives have the meaning. And so we went after bandwidth 3 because it was untapped. And so we developed and then we launched there.
So
and
good.
Out of that we get people like Lucas.
So good.
Right.
We talked about opportunities and those that Jesus will put in our path here. How many times has he come to you with his next idea and you're like, or are you finding that some of those are actually in your path and you have to deliver them to Troy?
A little of both.
Okay.
Yeah, there's yeah, lots of times. I mean, he's constantly.
She's got to own this right now. Thank you for helping our marriage. You have enriched our marriage. She's coached too.
The last example I'll give you was last week we were cooking for something and I just felt like God was saying, maybe you should offer to do this for them.
This is the Lighthouse Shelter in Marion. They feed they house families for up to a month. They have desperate need, cold, critical. Churches can't get there. But we're tough. Go ahead.
So anytime that we have food left over from an event, we take it to the Lighthouse.
Always.
What's left.
We take them good stuff.
So I just felt like maybe we should offer to do that once a week during the cold, the winter months when it's really cold and they have a lot of people.
This is a woman that says, I need to rest. You're doing too much.
Yeah, so
I want to get that on the record.
I kept my mouth shut and said nothing to Troy.
She lied. She did not come out for Jesus on this one. She sheltered down. What happened?
How'd that go?
And then the next day, the Lighthouse Shelter called and said, would you be interested in doing a meal once a week?
They've never called me in 15 years. I just take stuff generous. They called and I said, honey, guess what? She says, I knew the Lord was going to do that.
I had to confess.
So now, that next Thursday, we're taking them a meal, you know? And it was on top. Last week was just huge week. You know,
look, I'm not, and there was another time a couple of years ago where somebody mentioned to him a job offer where we would have to move to the middle, to an entirely different part of the world.
Middle East, 120-degree weather.
Hot, and I'm just coming out of menopause, and I hate hot.
I can relate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Troy just said, so-and-so just said they might have a position open and da-da-da. And
it was very interesting.
I kind of laughed and walked off.
You did. That was the way you felt at the time.
Yeah.
She left, and I told the person this is not going to go over well.
No way.
But I'll tell her, and if she's into it, I'll call you back. So I went in. Hang on. I went back into my office to call him back and said, my wife just laughed at me, passed by me. She won't admit to this, but she went past me, went into the bedroom, and she said she didn't slam the door. But us men know what that door closing at that level means.
I wasn't upset.
She was hot. She was really hot at the time. The menopause.
Go ahead. I went to the room. I was typing to the guy and said, this isn't happening. I'm not coming to the Middle East. And the Lord had just told me that.
But then I felt convicted to
to at least entertain it.
I have told Troy I will never stand in the way of something God's telling
Amen.
us to do.
The Lord,
so I had to go back in and tell him, just because I laughed,
with tears in her eyes,
think
right,
that I would stand in the way of that. If if that's what God's really telling us to do, we'll do it.
We'll do it. Yeah. And that morning, I'd had a devotion with the Lord. The Lord got me up, and the Lord told me that day to be patient and be obedient to Him. When I got that, and I got the call 15 minutes later from my intercessor, Karen Paul, who we all know. Yeah. And she said, the Lord told me to tell you this morning to be patient, be obedient. She gave me the exact words.
Stop.
And then I went in. I wasn't even gone into Beth yet. 15 minutes later, I get the call for the job offer. Would you be willing to go into the Middle East and do this and this for us for a network of churches? I thought, the Lord told me to be patient, be obedient. Maybe this is what He wants me to do right now. So I said, I'll go tell my wife if she doesn't kill me. We'll try it. And the guy knew me. And I went and told her, and then she blew it out of the water initially. And I went back to tell him, and she walks in and says, I'll go. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. We're going to we can go to the Middle East. God didn't end up sending us there, but He opened new doors for us. So He wanted to see if we were willing. And through that, that's how we got to the multi-level thing. I run the Hands Hope Foundation as the executive director. We do medical education and church development around the world. We've done Bulgaria. We've done some work in Honduras, but we're predominantly right now in Liberia. And we also in Thailand. We planted churches over there that are ours. We've built clinics and surgical stuff. We take medical teams. Next March 2025, we'll be taking a team there. If you'll watch in the next months ahead on hohfoundation.org, we'll be our Hands Hope Foundation Facebook site. We'll be telling people about chances to go if you're a nurse, doctor, PA, even if a secondary. If you just want to go and be a part, you can be a part of our teams, one of our crusade teams. You don't have to be a medical person. We'll be going so we run that, and then I run the church.
And just because I support him on all those, I don't go on all those.
She doesn't necessarily go on those. Yeah. Some of that's just to hold the camp.
I've only been to Africa once.
Does he need fuel or refueling, or do you guys just stay on autopilot and you're ready to go when and if and how and where and that kind of thing?
Oh no, he needs refueling.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, now I would say 15 years ago, no.
Not near as much then.
No,
not near as much here.
But now.
But the bandwidth is higher. So because I run the church, I've got the foundation,
right?
And now the Herrin House of Hope falls under the Hands of Hope Foundation. So we have 3 major organizations. That's a feeding program in Herrin. It's run by John Steve, our executive. He's running that. So I'm giving him leadership as a board president.
Okay.
We got the Hands of Hope. We got this. So it's getting broader. And we're not just planting churches anymore. What I'm doing is planting pastors that are now doing the plan. Yeah. I'm not planting the church anymore.
You're now delegating some of that responsibility.
I'm learning, developing, launching new leaders now.
Right.
So I'm taking my book knowledge and my doctoral knowledge and my experience and now investing that in the next generation. A lot like what you're doing, Angie, here with Growing Media. You've got an incredible team right here that you're empowering to do amazing work.
Yeah.
And we're doing the same thing. I started with 6 pastors that stepped forward in Thailand when we began there years ago, and now we have 26 doing pastors in small groups. Liberia, 15 churches now are 120.
Yeah. All right, here's what we got to do. That was a great segue into our next podcast, which we've invited them to stay on. We're going to talk a little bit about this knowledge commerce and, people wanting what you know and your experience. I mean, when you get older, it's like, why not share with all the folks, how to avoid this pitfall or that pitfall, and here's what worked and here's what didn't work. So
addition's one thing, but what you're talking about in this next thing is multiplication, which is actually more powerful.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so
absolutely,
you feel good about that one?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're a fan. I mean, you like them so much you moved in with them.
They're
at
like
one
my
point,
second
right?
parents.
I mean, Lucas is our family.
Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and you know where to find us, and we will see you next time right here.
See ya.